Welcome to Let's Talk Micro. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Micro. As always, I hope you had a great week. You can always find Let's Talk Micro on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, GoodPods. Whatever you listen to your podcast, you can find Let's Talk Micro. As far as social media, I am on Instagram as Let's Talk Micro, no apostrophe, on Twitter as Let's Talk Micro 1, on LinkedIn as Luis Plaza, and on TikTok as Let's Talk Micro. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, download episodes, leave a review if the app allows you to do so, and definitely leave any feedback on social media. I always like to post pictures of organisms and give updates as to when the next episode is coming out. So definitely any feedback, any suggestions, they are always welcome and appreciated. And you can always email me at letstalkmicro@outlook.com. And you can also, you can send your suggestions that way. So, as always, thank you for listening. And this past weekend, I came from a conference in Florida, the First Coast Infectious Disease Symposium. And it was definitely very fun connecting to people, promoting the podcast. I definitely reached out to some of the presenters, and some of them, they have agreed to be guests. So definitely stay tuned. A lot of good things coming your way. If you haven't checked out the previous episode of Let's Talk Micro, please go ahead and do so. It is the conclusion of a 3-episode series about bacillus. On the first 2, I went over the groups of bacillus, diseases, morphology, media. And on the last episode, I went ahead and went over Bacillus anthracis. I talked about anthrax, all the types of anthrax that you have, like inhalational, ingestion. I used terms, and I reminded the students about terms that they kind of need to remember, and it will help them when they're taking an examination, like the ASCP. So definitely, things like wool sorters and rag pickers. And, Bacillus anthracis has the potential of being used as a bioterror agent. So I talked about the laboratory response network, a little refresher on that, on biosafety levels. So all in all, it's a really good episode. I went over the motility testing, which is very important when you're dealing with Bacillus anthracis, because Bacillus anthracis is non-motile, whereas other bacillus, they are motile. So if you haven't checked out that episode, please go ahead and do so. And on today's episode, we are shaking things up a little. I'm talking something within microbiology, but something a little bit different. Most of you might be familiar with a show called The Last of Us on HBO. Great show. It is based on a game. I have never played it. But all in all, it's well done. I love the stories, how the episodes, the visuals. It is a great show. And in that show, they refer to, people are infected with Cordyceps, which is a fungus. Well, actually, a large group of fungi. And they are infected and they become zombies. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to go ahead and talk about Cordyceps. And as always, things in this podcast, they're done in a responsible manner. So I went ahead and I brought a guest to talk about Cordyceps. And his name is Dr. Andre Speck. And he is from the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. So he is an infectious disease doctor that deals with fungi. So he came to the podcast. He talked about Cordyceps, how it works, does it infect humans? We also went over, because the show talks about body temperature and like fungi can infect us because of our body temperature. So we went ahead and talked about that. Definitely great conversation with Dr. Speck. I hope you enjoy it the same way I did. So it was fun talking about Cordyceps. And one thing that was very interesting was that he mentioned that he has seen cases of people infected with fungi that they can find any literature about that fungi infecting people before. So that's something definitely very interesting. And he talks about that. And also he kind of, talks about how fungi should definitely be given more importance, which is something that I agree with. So like I mentioned, all in all, a great episode, and I hope you enjoyed. So let's go ahead and listen to it. So on today's episode, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I mean, maybe some of you out there have been watching a show called The Last of Us, and you have heard about cordyceps, and maybe you're doing research and you want to learn more. So I figure, why not do an episode about it? Just bring some information out there in a responsible manner. So today I have a guest to talk about cordyceps. His name is Dr. Andre Speck, and he is a professor of medicine at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. All right, Dr. Speck, welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Well, nice to be here. I'm very, very excited to talk to you about fungi.
Definitely my pleasure. So I kind of introduce you and I talk about what you do. So you're a professor, and then you're part of the Washington University Infectious Diseases Division.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right on it. All right. So what kind of fungus is cordyceps?
So Cordyceps is a large group of fungi. There's over 600 species. They're macrofungi, or in the Ascomycete group, which means sac fungi, and they are famous for the fact that endoparasites of arthropods. So mainly insects, but also some other arthropods.
Okay, definitely. And that was something that I was reading about them being parasite, and you mentioned insects. So like how does that work? What do they do to their host?
Oh, they once they infect the host, they slowly essentially replace more and more of the tissue of the host with their own mass. So basically, they eat the host from the inside out. And when the host is exhausted, metabolically speaking, not physically exhausted, when there's very little tissue left to eat, they will hijack the behavior of the host to go to a advantageous place where they kind of just dig in, or the ants will often just like bite onto a blade of grass so that they can and kind of freeze in place, and then the fungus will fruit from there and create it looks like a little club that comes out in order to spread spores further and infect more and more fungi.
Wow, that's definitely very, very interested. They kind of use the word zombie because you say, it takes over the organism.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a word that's used kind of loosely. It doesn't create true zombies. The ants don't go around biting one another in order to infect the other ants. But what they do is they hijack the behavior, which is usually what that means by turning them into zombies, which we've seen happen before with other endoparasites.
Okay. And one thing, for the audience to understand, because this is something that, like I see they talk about when they refer to the show, and I don't know, we kind of spoke that you haven't seen it, but as far as, they talk about body temperature. And one of the things that the premises of the show was that they said, well, because of our body temperature, cordyceps couldn't infect humans. And then as our body, as the world gets warmer, then now they're infecting us. So what is that relationship about with body temperature and fungi?
That's a great question. So fungi are kind of they're opportunists. Very few fungi create these elegant, delicate relationships where they evolve back and forth with another species. They work with multiple species. They consume what they can. And one of the biggest things that protects us from being killed by fungi is our body temperature. The vast majority of molds and yeast out there in the world are not capable of surviving at 37 degrees Celsius. So you grow them at 25, they're wonderful, they're doing great. You grow them at 37, they just don't grow. And so what's really fascinating is that as we're having these extreme weather events, which are really more important than the actual overall temperature, they're creating bottlenecks in the evolution of fungi. And so some fungi that used to be, the average 50% of them will survive at 22 degrees are now 50% of them are surviving at 27, which means that there's outliers in that population that are able to survive to 35, 36, 37. And the more of these extreme weather events that we have, like last year in the summer when north of France got to 44 degrees Celsius, which was just insane. It's never happened that we know of. Those kinds of events kind of create these bottlenecks. And what's really scary is that fungi are biochemical factories. Many of our antibiotics, many of our antifungals, many of our chemotherapies come from fungi. And so there are also species that are highly resistant to any of the drugs we have. And there are fungi that are very good and have everything else that they need to pathogenize humans, but they just don't have the temperature tolerance. And so if we give them that through global warming and these extreme weather events, we might literally be brewing incredibly competent fungi. And to give you an idea of how important this is, all across the ecosystems, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of species that are undergoing collapses in their populations because of fungi. So frogs, salamanders, newts, they're being completely destroyed by fungi. The white-nosed bat syndrome, which is killing off whole colonies of bats and making many species threatened, is a fungus. And it's all related to their lower body temperature. If you take an infected frog, you take it out of the cooler environment and you put it in a lab at about 37, 38 degrees Celsius, which the frog can handle for some amount of time, it's cured from the fungus. And so that is that fascinating change. And then people like me so I run a referral clinic for fungi. We I would say 2 or 3 times a year, I treat a new patient with a fungus that I cannot find to have caused disease in literature. So we find cases of this is a fungus that normally digests plants or does something completely unrelated. Eats nematodes in the ground, that kind of stuff. This is a real proven infection in a patient. I have a couple of those every year. Those are not Last of Us kind of outbreaks where we're looking at, the whole collapse of the world society because of one fungus. But we are definitely seeing these rumblings of fungi that are becoming competent, presumably. It could be just that we're better at diagnosing them. Could be that we never really reported the other ones. But it isn't, to me, it's an alarming number.
Yes, I can definitely see that. And just out of curiosity, I mean, so far, have they been treatable?
So far, they have. We have seen a lot more treatment. We've seen them be treatable. There are actually fungi right now that we've known for decades cause human disease that don't have a treatment. Fungi like Lamentospora prolificans, which can cause seriously invasive disease. I would argue that they do not have any therapy.
Wow, this is definitely something, to think about. I mean, we definitely, as far as we're so busy, seeing how bacteria are, getting resistant, and sometimes, it keeps increasing. And now that potentially comes into the mix where, this fungi can start infecting us. It's something that, gives us something to think about. And then you definitely, you touch on the temperature. I mean, as far as can cordyceps infect humans or cause any sort of a disease? Or
I have never heard of a single case of a cordyceps causing human disease. I know we have. I actually don't know if they can cause any disease outside of arthropods. They might, again, because I'm not a cordyceps expert, and it's a very large group of fungi, right? It's over 600 species, so there might be one. But they're predominantly specialized to arthropods. And then I know we have been ingesting cordyceps for a very long time. It's used in the kind of the herbal medicine realm. I don't know if that has any side effects because that area is just not studied. So it might do something bad to people. It may do nothing. I know I see it every now and then. Recently, I saw while walking through Whole Foods a coffee substitute that was made from cordyceps fungi. So it's like a ground cordyceps fungi that you're supposed to steep like coffee beans and drink like coffee. And a colleague of mine picked it up and tasted it and said it tasted just absolutely horrid.
Okay, I mean that kind of yeah, that jumped in mind when you mentioned that. I don't know, wasn't thinking that it would taste that good or similar to coffee in that matter.
Yeah, I would imagine it. I don't know why you would think it would taste similar to coffee, but nonetheless, they tried it, and according to my colleague, it was horrendous.
Wow. Okay, so if it's been used in some sort of way that you can ingest it, right? Yeah, then it doesn't seems that it doesn't cause harm to us.
Probably, this is not necessarily studied, and there might be some more subtle harms. It's not definitely uh, something that we. It's definitely not going to kill you. It's not going to be like those fungi, like some of the like the death caps and death angels kind of mushrooms where you eat it and then 3 weeks later your liver turns into goo and you're dead. But it may have some more subtle side effects that we just don't know.
Okay, and is there anything else that you want to add about cordyceps or anything in general?
What I would say is that fungi are an incredible amount of pathology happens to humans and fungi, and we diagnose it late. We undertreat it, we understudy it, we understand it, and it is incredibly important for the world for us to stop doing that and start to learn more about them, study them, and be more familiar with them.
Okay, yeah, it's like maybe like bacteria and viruses, they're given more importance as far as being studied and more research along those lines.
There's a quote that I wish I was mine, but I it's not. But I don't remember where it comes from. That said that the antiquity belonged to the parasites and the past to the bacteria. The present is viral, but the future is all too fungal. And as we've done a very good job with parasites over the years. The parasites are still a problem. I'm not going to say malaria is not an issue. But we have definitely decreased the proportion of humans that die of parasites, and then we've done a lot better with bacteria. Because if you think about like the 1920s pre-antibiotic era, we've done very people who have done died very had a very high mortality with things like pneumonia. Whereas with fungi, we are moving the needle much slower than we are with many of the other diseases, infectious diseases. And the main reason for that is that fungi are one understudied and under resourced. But the other issue is that fungi are also eukaryotes. So it's very easy to make an antifungal. It's just very hard to make an antifungal that's not also a good anti-human. So we spend a lot of our time working in that like more of a narrow range of toxicity, and so it ends up being a little bit of a harder task. And that with it being a little under resourced is is a bad combination.
Yeah, and I can definitely even in my line of work, on more in a clinical lab, you kind of see that where typically either, you know, it's you work with them and like maybe in a large labs and it's more compartmentalized. So I can definitely see what you're saying and understand it. Well, Dr. Speck, this has been so informative and I learned so much. So thank you so much for taking the time to coming into Let's Talk Micro.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much.
You have a good day.
And that, my dear audience, it's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Speck talk about cordyceps and fungi. Definitely a great episode, and I enjoy sharing this information with you. Definitely, shout out to all the people from the First Coast Symposium, all the organizers, presenters. You did a great job. I definitely had a great time, great presenters, great food, great everything. And it was just great connecting with microbiologists and promoting Let's Talk Micro. So, thank you. As always, continue bringing that passion to what you do. It is very important. It will make you better at your job, and it's such a great job. As always, stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro. Until the next time. Bye.